name is Angela Carr, and I'm the author of the Rose Concordance. It's a book of poetry, and it's divided into sections that are called corridors because you can travel through a sort of keyword corridor through the poems. About a love of language. In this case, it's about loving the texture of the language I found on the pages in that old, well, it was a new book of old language, old French language. It was about falling in love with both the way the sounds and the shapes of the words before standardized spelling, and with the layout on the page and these big wide open lines, and with all of the space between images because it was disjunctive and yet lyrical. So it was about that. It was about loving that and wanting to somehow... It was an aesthetic thing, you know, wanting to make poems like that. But that's not really... That's a very like writerly answer as to what it's about. I would say that I think that it's kind of like when the love and argument poem at the end of the book, I think that's what it's about. It's about love, argument. You know, whether that's taken like literally to be like a social construct or whether one's talking about argument as like a critical stance or whatever, that's what it's about. Well, the Rose Concordance, the rose refers to the Roman de la Rose, which is the medieval French poem, where the rose is the object of the lover's quest. But it's also the book that, you know, I fell in love with at the library, and it was actually pink. And the word rose is rose, it's pink. So it's also the pink concordance. It's a keyword index where all the lines from a literary work are rearranged according to keyword classifications. I translated a concordance, yeah, sort of, because it was in medieval French. Or at least I started translating it, and then my friend said, "This is funny, you should do more." So I did more. One of the first things that struck me about the concordance was, it wasn't simply the visual beauty of it, but the resemblance to, I guess, minimalist classical music in that there was this old poetic music being resampled, and there was a lot of repetition and subtle shifts and permutations, and yet the bass was this this old meter. There isn't really much of a relationship between the medieval poem and the book, except that there are some allegorical figures that come in, that appear from time to time in the poems. And there's some language, like the language, the love language, it's all sort of like parodied from the concordance. I mean, from the medieval poem via the concordance. I think that's the only reason I do anything, because people ask me to write poems, and then that's what inspires me. So yeah.
Interesting.
And to some extent, you know, to some extent I'm always doing it, but there's certainly like an aspect of community or the request or something that... I don't think it was based on any theory, you know, And it's funny too, because when I was, when I was at school, I thought about theory and school as being like these sort of schools of thought that one would appropriate or inquire. But, now I just think of theory as being sort of creative writing. A lot of, especially like the French theorists, they're brilliant writers. They're thinking and they're creating text, and I don't know, like how different is that from poetry?